Afghanistan. Let's bring in our guests in the studio then, former Labour advisor Matthew Latzer and also Russell Quirk, of course, as well. Matthew, let's come to you. I want to bring it back to the Labour battles over this. Now, you're a former advisor to a former Labour leader. You've been involved in Labour politics throughout your life.
Sure.
Is, as you know, some of the papers are claiming today, Labour tearing itself apart in Israel? The Americans seem to be pretty sticking together on this. We've seen some differences within the EU. In Britain, the government seems sort of, and the Conservative Party, they seem to be pretty much on one track on this in terms of support for Israel, right of self-defence, etc., but calling for a pause. Your Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, got in trouble after an interview done quite some days ago, where he claimed he was answering sort of a previous question about Israel's right to self-defence, but it appeared certainly that he was saying he supported the limiting of, stopping of aid and food and water and medical aid to people of Gaza. We've seen, 150 or so, is it, Labour councillors resign?
Yeah, I think it's more. I think it's another 100 today.
Another 100 today. I mean, we've got thousands to resign. You've got plenty going. We've got apparently four shadow front bench ministers on resignation watch. They include Sarah Owen, the Shadow Faith Minister, Rachel Hopkins, the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister. I've never heard of these people. I doubt their own families know they're in the shadow front bench team. But how big a risk is this to?
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned that those two MPs, because they're both on the front bench and they both come from very different wings of the party, but they're both united by one thing. They both represent the two halves of Luton, which is a town with one of the highest percentage of Muslim populations in the country. So what's happening is that Labour MPs and Labour councillors across the country are coming under a lot of pressure from Muslim communities that they represent, from Muslim members within their party, and that's what's causing the tensions really within the party. That's the key to what's happening. Keir will stay firm in his support of Israel's right to defend itself. The problem was the interview that he did 10 days ago, because he, as you say, it was clumsy language. It was a bit sort of confusing what question he was answering, and he appeared to
probably
be
trying to sit on the fence too much.
So therefore he gave the impression, he basically gave a chink of light for those who want to see the position change on Israel because of a clumsy answer to that question.
Well, there's lots of Labour people who are unhappy with him, and it's all over the internet. They're all saying they want him to call for a ceasefire.
Yes.
Now, he hasn't called for a ceasefire.
And he won't.
He's echoed that call for a pause. He's been, we know about Labour's anti-Semitism problem under Jeremy Corbyn. Now, whether or not he brought more of that to the party, whether it was all sitting there latent already and it was exposed under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, certainly one of the things Sir Keir Starmer has tried to do is to try and push that side. One of the first statements he made when he became Labour leader in 2020 was about that. That said, I've not got much time for a man who was happy to put Jeremy Corbyn into office only a couple of months earlier, in December 2019. He campaigned as his shadow Brexit secretary for that man to become a leader, given his views, given that Jeremy Corbyn said that Hamas were his friends. And we know people verified this, that in the shadow cabinet meetings, Keir Starmer never at any point spoke up about this issue. Others like Lisa Nandy, who was another leadership candidate, certainly did, and people have verified that. There is a big concern for a lot of people, not just in the Jewish community, that Keir Starmer would just say whatever he needs to say to get elected, and you can't trust anything that he says. He doesn't believe in anything. He focus groups everything, and he changes his mind along with the wind.
Well, look, I think, I can see how people may be cynical like that. On anti-Semitism...
Not being cynical, it's just what they think.
On anti-Semitism, I think that Keir is absolutely clear, and I don't think
He's absolutely clear. He was happy to elect Jeremy Corbyn.
He was absolutely clear when he became leader of the party that this was his number one priority.
So it was his number one priority that we shouldn't have anti-Semitism in this country being running riot. And once he became leader, but he wasn't that bothered about it before.
Well,
there
are issues where I think there are issues where there are instances where he did raise it publicly. Whether he raised it in the shadow cabinet, I don't know. But in terms of what he's done, he has absolutely transformed the Labour Party's relationship with the Jewish community, which has historically been a very close one. I went to the Jewish Labour Movement conference a few months ago, and I can tell you the relief and thanks for what Keir and the rest of the team have done.
I would just say basically being just blatantly normal and civilised.
Exactly, and civilised, absolutely.
You shouldn't get a round of applause for not being...
No, absolutely.
And it should be a given.
You say, was it latent in the party? What's happened is we have about 100,000 members who have left. They tend, since Keir, and about 100,000 have joined. There's been a huge churn in the membership, which is about 400,000.
Yeah.
And those people...
You tried to get rid of the lunatics.
Are the lunatics. Yes, so I'll be allowed to use that word. Yes, they're the people who when you said I've been involved for a long time. I've sat in meetings since I was 16, and that's a long time ago. And they're the people who you really don't want in meetings at a local local level, and you certainly don't want representing you
But they're the people who turn up to their party conferences, and you see more Palestinian flags than you do
and they've gone.
Jacks.
Of course, there are a few left. So the current dispute isn't driven by anti-Semitism. It's driven by two things. The current row about whether or not their position should soften in terms of a ceasefire. It's driven by people with large Muslim communities, and obviously Muslim communities feel particularly strongly about the humanitarian issue in Palestine, the Palestinian territories. And secondly, it's driven by people from a sort of international aid perspective. And that's a big part of Labour sentiment. Now, Julia, my warning to anybody in the Labour Party is, yes, it's absolutely fine and right to be concerned about humanitarian conditions in Gaza.
I think we should all be.
Absolutely. But don't be taken in and driven in to calling for a ceasefire, which is wrong, as Richard Kemp said there. But is
also
only
benefits Hamas.
Only benefits Hamas. So that's what I'm saying is, please don't be sucked in.
Is Keir Starmer, is his attempt to sort of heal the rift by, basically, trying to sort of, and as always, sitting on the fence on these things, it's not harsh, it's a statement of fact. Is that going to be enough to quell this issue? Because, again, it used to be, certainly it was the case many years, 80% of Jewish people in this country would vote for the Labour Party, but that's a very, very tiny number of people, like 250,000 in total, and that would include, under 18s. Whereas we're looking at, 6 million?
About 6, maybe slightly more,
people who have come from a Muslim backgrounds in this country. It's a very big part of Labour's vote now in many, many seats, as we see around the country. A lot of people are seeing this as a sort of a moment when Keir Starmer's going to have to choose between what he actually, we think, believes, who knows whether he knows what he believes or not in terms of Israel's right of self-defence, and what the Muslim communities who are pressuring their Labour representatives and councillors and MPs want him to say and want him to push for. And he's going to have to choose. Which way do you think he'll go? I don't
think it's a case between choosing between two communities. I think it's a case that Keir needs to continue to stand up for what he thinks is right, which is support Israel's right to defend itself, support humanitarian assistance for Gaza, and support calls for
but these people, these Labour MPs and councillors are saying you can't do both.
Well,
if you're backing Israel's right of self-defence, then you're basically saying you're going to allow the killing of civilians in Gaza.
Well, I think the key thing is, and that's what he's done over the last 24 hours. Frankly, Julia, he should have done it last week after the.
Well, he had to focus group it first. He had to have meeting after meeting and send memos.
All politicians have meeting after meeting.
I've sat in too many of them. What do I think? What do I actually think about this?
All politicians have a lot of meetings before they say this.
No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't.
Maybe they shouldn't, but that's the politics we have.
And your soul immediately what is the right thing.
And he has been absolutely clear in his support. What he needs to do is to continue to make sure that the message that Labour supports humanitarian aid getting in goes out, but that his support for Israel's right to defend itself remains clear and consistent.
Look, you're a Conservative. This isn't your battle in terms of what's going on in the Labour Party. How do you think this is going to work out?
Yeah, no, I don't think Starmer has been very clear. You can't stand up as a potential Prime Minister 12 months away from an election and pretend to be statesmanlike and talk about the fact that Gaza, should have its fuel and its water and electricity turned off, and then because you get pressure from the left wing of the party and the Muslim contingent, then decide that that's not what you meant.
I don't think he really. On this one, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay. I think he will say yes, Israel has a right.
Julia, unfortunately, we're going to have to. But I think what we're seeing in Keir Starmer, and he has an opportunity now to show character, to show statesman. Yeah, but he's failing because what he's doing, as ever, is flip-flopping based on populism, based on polls, based on the party putting him from one place to another. What we actually need to see is a return to some authenticity in politics. Now, I know that's a bit of a tall order, but please can we see some conviction?
But I think also this goes back to, again, since Tony Blair's days. Now, lots of people criticise him, say he's a war criminal over Iraq and the like. But when we saw, Ed Miliband, who you worked closely with, when he was Labour leader, he led the calls for us not to go in to protect people in Syria because, of course, we'd seen the quagmire of Iraq and Afghanistan, so we shouldn't go in. Well, how's that working out? Because a hell of a lot more people died as a result of that war and Assad's bombing of his own people. It does seem to me that, Labour's sort of wanting to be on the nice side, to virtue signal each time, and people saying they want peace. Well, we all want peace. The Israeli people who were at that peace festival, that music festival, they wanted
They were peace activists.
People living in a kibbutz wanted peace.
Look, kibbutz were part of the Labour tradition in Israel. They're part of a Labour tradition of Zionism that started in Eastern Europe. There's very close links to the Labour Party here. Look, I think, what happened in the interview that he gave, this infamous interview, was he appeared to strike a position out which was to the right. It was more of a blank cheque to Israel than was being given by Rishi Rishi Sunak here or Joe Biden in the States. So that was what then suddenly set alarm bells ringing, and people have pounced on that and they've tried to push it open. What he's got to do is be clear that humanitarian aid, yes, but no to a ceasefire and yes to Israel's right to defend itself.
I have a funny feeling that's not going to go down very well, but then some non-entities on the front bench will resign.
Well, noticeably, they're still there today. It's all talk and no resignation.
But at least he actually realised how to take a position for once.
Yes, well, exactly. These are the moments when you learn the cut of someone's jib.
It's a key test.
Bearing in mind, in a year's time, he could be Prime Minister, having to make these decisions. Matthew Lauser, really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much. Russell Quirk staying with us.